welcome to this Keystone Key session on preparing your people strategy for the new academic year. My name is Matthew Clements Wheeler, and I'm the host and facilitator today. Our resident expert that I'm in conversation with, and the person you really want to hear from, is Pippa Lloyd. Who is head of HR, both our internal arrangements here at Keystone and our consultancy practice. Pip, do you just want to say hello to the people on the webinar and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Yes, well, I think you've said it all apart from I'm not so sure where I get the expert from, but yeah, I have been in HR for many years now, worked across several different schools, whether that be large multi-academy trusts, standalone, maintained schools, varying degrees of mixed between SEND, primary and secondary. And as I say, is hopefully today we'll get you some key points answered and start looking at your strategy. So as always with HR, I say it's not actually that difficult once you know how, or you apply a little bit of common sense. So we'll keep that to ourselves. The expert part is just common sense.
So to that end, Pip, what would you say are the I don't know, the key components of a successful MAT strategy for the new year?
Well, I think that there's two elements to it, and I like to break HR down into the people part and the HR part. And this is something that historically, when we've looked at it, we've said HR practices. We call ourselves human resource experts. And the fact is, actually, we're moving away from that now. The recognition is that your people are a resource. We understand that HR is about moving these resources around, but we've accepted now that we're people, we are human beings. So what I like to look at is the fact of going, well, what is our HR element? So that's our operational functions, our policies, our procedures, our practices, our systems. And then what is the people element? So we look at the culture side of it, the benefit side of it, the actual well-being of the people, the training that we've got within those. So I think, as I say, the key components really are looking about those two elements and what sits underneath those elements, and splitting it apart in order to bring it back together.
Okay, so I get that. I like from my lay point of view, because I'm not an HR practitioner. I'm a former COO myself and governance advisor and governance professional. But HR doesn't happen, I guess, in isolation, does it? So HR leads need to align their people strategy, I guess, to the goals of their trust. How
Yeah.
how how does that happen?
Communication. I think what we find in schools, Matthew, is we do a lot of things in silo. We automatically, we have a finance function, we have a payroll function, we have a curriculum lead, we have our different departments. And historically, it's been easy for us all to just go, right, well, that's what I'm doing, that's what I'm doing, that's what I'm doing. And actually, what we need to do as leaders is sit down with all of these groups and look at, well, what is it moving forward? HR there is a support function. We're there to help get you where you need so that the pupils are getting the best. I always say to my HR team that we are making an impact on those children because it's what we're doing in the background. And if we can take it away from the leaders and give them the support and empower the employees that we've got within the organization to be the best that they can be, then we are doing that impact, and we are doing a good job for it. So I think what we have to do is look at what the strategy is for the school or the academy trust, and where those key parts link back to the people within that organization, and start building our HR strategy from that. And the only way we can do that is with decent conversation across all of the stakeholders that are going to be impacted by it. There's nothing worse than somebody from HR coming in and going, right, well, you've got to do that, and actually not understanding what impact that has. That there's certain bits we can't change. We know that payroll is the largest percentage of an academy's or a school's budget, and we have to try and work a strategy to go, well, how do we make the best of what we've got? How do we minimize that payroll budget? Well, actually, we need to know what the financial budget is. So you might want to look at an ICFP, for instance, to understand where your curriculum's going. So unless you link all of those things in, and have those key conversations, I think you're going to fail at your strategy from the start anyway. You have to know what's going on in each individual area. Sometimes what I will do is look at the overall growth strategy of the Academy Trust and say, right, let's break it down. What's their 5 year? What's their 3 years? Let's look at what the immediate impact is, and then go and have those individual conversations to bring it back into one larger conversation. We run out of time in schools, let's face it, it's precious, isn't it? So we don't want to sit for hours and hours and hours around big meetings and big tables, but if you can gather that in as a when you're starting a HR or a people strategy, and actually just pinpoint where those key conversations need to be, then that's going to set you up to the success.
Okay, so you say you're not a fan of endless meetings, but a random question here. In your view, does the HR lead need to attend board meetings? Rather than, because we see a range, don't we? We see HR leads that are confined within a people or an HR committee. Is the role of a people strategy so fundamental to the success or failure of a MAT?
I think what you have to bear in mind is if you've got a trained HR expert in your school, so if you've got somebody that's been through, whether it's a HR business management course or if it's the full CIPD, part of what we look at and train to do is find the solutions and look at the problems. So for me, I think there is an element of saying, well, actually, having them in the conversations, they're going to look at it at a different angle. They're going to see what you're doing. We don't understand what you're doing. I'm not going to sit there and say I have any idea how to go and stand up in front of a child and teach them and mentor them and coach them. But what I can do is stand in front of an adult and say, okay, so what are the methods that you take when you're teaching the children that can be then transferred across? So there is an element, I would say, of actually, if they are involved in those board meetings and they are understanding what's going on, then there's key bits that they're picking up and going, okay, I might need to change what I'm doing with people here. And it's those missing links of there's an automatic assumed knowledge.
Okay. So what would you say the most common challenges that MATs face when implementing a new people strategy or refreshing to a significant extent their current strategy?
At the minute, Matthew, let's go. It's post-Brexit. I mean, I know that seems stupid, but we're 4 years away from COVID. We're 4 years away from Brexit. That absolutely then became the Brexit Freedom Bill changed. So in December 2023, everything that we had as the kind of bridging gap between Brexit and then for legislation was released. So, at the moment, the biggest thing for your strategy is the fact that we've just got so much impacting on it. We are changing governments and that then, on top of, I think we're going to see, potentially 50, 60, 70 different legislation changes within employment law. We've already seen quite a lot coming through at the moment. Typically within education, we only look at a year's long period. We'll go into September now and go, right, we're going to run that through until August, and then we're going to have a look at what's next. And if you go back the last couple of years, it's getting later and later that we're finding out what payroll's going to be. We're kind of going, well, we've only just had it announced in the last few weeks of the percentage increase for teachers. And then you start thinking, well, actually, there's a big disparity there between our support staff as well. So all of a sudden, you're working at this rapid change. And I think it is challenging because where do you go next? You want your policies, you want your procedures. They've got to be up to date and they've got to be, compliant. But you might have unions that you've got, well, I say you might, you will, because, we haven't got rid of the unions. So we've got to then start going through the consultation period. It takes time. We have to do that while we're doing the day-to-day. So as with everything within schools, it's, I don't think there's any area in a multi-academy trust or a standalone school that isn't challenging. It's about where we sit and go, well, what do we need to prioritise on? And as I say, I have to say, fundamentally, this year I think is just going to be one of the harder years. I mean, since December, we're just getting so much thrown at us.
Okay, that's a difference in tone, I guess, to the not New Labour, because it's not Tony Blair's Labour, but the new Labour government, a government of service. We've come out of
Yeah.
the Olympics. We're heading into the Paras. The weather is okay. So are HR leads in trusts perhaps a less a more pessimistic breed, a more pragmatic breed than the CEO, the optimist? It's all going to be lovely now. Their government are going to open the funding taps, and it's going to be fabulous.
I think that there's two bits, and again, sometimes I can come across that way and go, yeah, I'm maybe going, there's going to be a lot of change and it's all going to be hell, but actually, you will find that HR is one of those that's what makes HR professionals thrive, and within your school, if you take that same attitude of the funding gate's going to open and everything's going to be fine, and apply it to, well, actually, the legislations that are changing, it's going to be how we move with them on our strategy. But actually, some really good positive changes coming through with the laws. Yeah, for the promoting well-being and promoting diversity, inclusion, there's some really good, strong elements coming through that are going to make a positive change in the workforce. And yes, they're going to be challenging and they're going to be hard, but actually, in the long run, it's a short-term tight squeeze of what they're doing to us and an uncertainty of they've given that 100-day period. So what are they going to do within that? But if you've got your resources and you're keeping on top of it, actually, it's not as, that's where your strategy comes in. That's where you go, well, actually, I'm aware of it. So I'm going to build it into my strategy of going, well, for the first few months now, we just need to look at what is going to change and we'll build the anticipation of that coming in.
Okay. So let's pick out a theme here. Let's say recruitment and retention, perhaps, because at the end of the day, schools, I guess, are people businesses, and everything else. The buildings the buildings are pretty essential in a British climate, but they're a nice to have. At the end of the day, what you need for teaching to happen is a teacher and a child together. Less so these days because it could be remote, but you need to put a teacher in front of a group of children and they can do it. We support that with a whole load of ancillary staff and other functions which are necessary to deliver a modern education. But we've got to recruit a workforce. So what are some of the strategies that MATS can use or are using to attract that top talent in a limited pool of people who want to come and work in education?
The simple answer is that is going to be your hardest thing. That's fundamentally what is an issue. And, if we look at, again, how governments will increase salaries to bring it up to, starting salaries of £30,000, and we're going to increase bringing these pools in. We are in a natural period where if you take birth rates, people going to university and that coming through into they've got to go and get that training, they've got to go and get that development. That's why we have the shortage. And in support staff, I think me and Matthew, we've had this conversation before, and I'm sure that it's not an unheard thing, but the support members of our school that are fundamental to supporting the children could go and work in Tesco's or Aldi and earn more and still have the flexibility and the benefits, but we stay within education because we want to support our next generation. We want to support it through. So recruitment is never going to be an easy one. It has to be one of those key points that you look at the top of your strategy. And there are ways that you can change the tact for it. Let's look at an employee life cycle. We have those generations that they came in. Matthew, how long have you been in education now?
Oh, since 2002.
So you've stayed in it. You've not left. You could go and you could take your skills elsewhere. And I appreciate you're not necessarily a teacher, but we stay in it. And we have those I've just realised I'm at risk of calling you really old here. I'm walking myself into
I like
that.
the word experienced.
Yeah, but we are in that risk of, we've got the ones that came in, they stayed in the teaching, and they've got the generation that they've gone all the way through their careers. And they're the ones that created the Multi Academy Trust. They've been through that cycle. And we are starting to see them drop off and go into retirement now. And it's that, well, there was something about that employee life cycle that kept it there before. So how do we keep it there now? And, are we just going out to grab because we want the experienced teachers because we want the best? Or are we looking at who we've got within our schools that have got a desire and a drive? And, I look at recruitment, and I don't know how many schools that you've been into, Matthew, but I know certainly when I go across to my clients, they generally go, well, we've got one platform for recruitment. So we go to TES, or then we go to an agency, or we use ET.
My new term. That's quite prevalent these days, isn't it? When certainly primary maths.
And you need to go, well, okay, that's great, because are we going to them because they've got the monopoly, or are we going to them because it's a one size fits all package that we can afford? But it's not just the teaching staff, is it? It's everything else. So yeah, you might want to stick with your platforms for your teaching staff, but we've got university sites that are free to advertise on. So I always say at this time of year, you have got the ones that have gone through their education that are going to start looking for their placements, and they're going to be finished in June, July, and they're going to be wanting to look at next September. So why not? Let's look at next September. Let's go to who we think's retiring. And I used to work with the head, Matthew, and he drove me potty because every year he'd go, right, I'm going to get 3 maths teachers. I'm like, you haven't got 3 maths vacancies. He's like, just trust me, I'll find them and it will all work out. And, you on the ground in your schools, whether you are a head teacher or a deputy head, or you're in a multi-academy trust as a CEO, you will have somebody that kind of that knows these conversations, your performance management conversations, your general conversations. You'll know who's coming up to, well, I might retire. Your flexible leave requests coming in to reduce down into early retirement will be coming in. And he used to look at all of that, and he just knew. So we would have the adverts going out saying September starters. So come January, I would be onto the university websites, and I would be putting the adverts in ready for September. And, sometimes it's hard for us to think that far ahead, but we can do it. And other trusts that I've worked within are looking at recruitment days. So before I was in education, I was in hospitals, and the way that we got the nurses was to grow our own. So we would take the healthcare assistants, we'd bring them into a day in the life of a hospital. And I did take that into one of the academy trusts that I worked with and said, okay, can we duplicate that? And we did. We took our lunchtime supervisors and the parent teachers, the volunteers, don't forget your volunteers, Matthew, they're still part of your workforce. And we brought them in let's have a walk around the school. Let's see what can you do? What are the different elements? And they might not necessarily be where you need them now. But if you can grow them into, okay, so we're going to go from your, let's do an apprenticeship in teaching assistants. Let's take you to being a higher level. Maybe you want to then start having a look at being a cover supervisor. And, well, can we then work with, it's easy for large multi-academy trusts. They don't generally have their own teaching colleges. But if you're a smaller one, can you start working within your family of trusts and family of schools to say, well, who's got a teaching college? Can we do a rotation round? So, it's just trying to think of one size doesn't fit all. I haven't got a solution for everybody because they just do not fit. It depends where you are in the country. It depends your demographic. But it's trying to think, because let's not just go down the TES, the eTeach, the one size platform. How many years ago, Matthew, is it since we used to have newspaper clippings in the, you'd walk around Tesco and you'd have the little job boards in the local supermarket. Genuinely, 4 years ago, I was absolutely struggling to find a site manager for a primary school. And I'd been through all of the normal routes. And I ended up putting a clip into the local shop. And I also went on a military recruitment site because it was in a Lincolnshire. So we had a lot of Lincolnshire, we have a lot of Air Force bases in Lincolnshire. And I went on to the military recruitment site, and there's actually sites for ex-servicemen that are looking to come out of the military into a school environment. And it took me a week to fill it, and that person is still in the school now, and it's like
That's an interesting example. At one school I worked in once, I spent the recruitment budget on sponsoring the community notice board at the bottom of the escalator in Tesco, massive, great big Tesco superstore in the Bromford area of Birmingham, and it meant that tens of thousands of people a week went past job adverts for support services. That was just, you couldn't come down the escalator without noticing the fact that in fact, I actually got asked by Tesco, could I stop using fluorescent orange paper on the notice board because it was too effective, it was distracting. Let's go for where we are, because we know we've got a new government at the moment. So you thinking about volunteers prompted me onto a very niche, very forgotten area of the workforce, which is sixth form students employed as lunchtime supervisors. I know we've had a conversation because this has cropped up in one of our clients. What are some of the potential liabilities that need to go into a people strategy, knowing that the government are going to perhaps change working rights?
Well, I think what we need to try and avoid first and foremost is they're not just your cheap labour that's going to bridge a gap. If you are asking whether it be volunteers, sixth formers to come in and work, or young apprentices straight from college, there is an element of remembering that actually is, if we want to use them as cheap labour, that's great, but you're never going to retain them. You're never going to keep them. And you're going to end up in hot water over the fact of, equal pay claims and are they doing the same job? You open up a bit of a minefield. I have no issue bringing in student sixth formers to support. But what I would say is double check what you are giving them as a contract. Make sure that what you are offering is of equal, or if it's not, that there is separation within that job description and actually everybody's clear and aware. There's nothing worse than walking into a school and you'll have let's stick with lunchtime supervisors, but you'll have 5 lunchtime supervisors and you'll find that they've been through TUPE and they've been through change, or there's been an update of somebody's contract somewhere and not somebody else's, and all of a sudden you've got 5 people doing exactly the same job, but they're on different job descriptions, they're on different terms and conditions. So if you're going to build your strategy and bring that in, that's fine. But what I would say is you actually then need to go, well, what sits underneath it? What is the recruitment process for them? Are they on fixed term contracts? And if they are, what is the length of that? Are you looking to offer them a job at the end of it when they've left sixth form? Is that something that you're actually just planning them to come in and do it because it's a bit of money for them? Or are you looking at actually this is a way that you can retain people within that cycle? And if that is your strategy, who's going to support them in it's difficult for those student sixth formers. They like to come in, they like to learn how to work, but there is that transition of when they are within there and they are supervising, they need to understand that it's a working role as well.
Yeah.
And as I say, it's a very fine balance, that one. I mean, I know you've come across it before, haven't you, Matthew?
Yeah, it's the difference between the pastoral staff and education leadership who think that they're providing work experience to students, and the HR lead who knows they're a member of the workforce with all of the rights and responsibilities and duty of care that comes with it. Let's That's a very sort of micro example. Let's go big. Let's go to the huge issue around professional development and performance related pay. Because in any strategy coming along this year is our lovely decoupling.
Yes. And I have no issue with decoupling because there is an element of holding somebody to account on money. Is you're only going to keep going for as much money as you need. We live within our means, and once we've run out of that, we want to increase. But if we're going to just automatically, year on year increase, that's fine. That can be an incentive. It can be a disengagement. It's how you harness it. So as I'm not against decoupling performance and pay because they are two different elements. And within schools, I think there is an element of performance professional development where we try and enforce it onto absolutely everybody. And what we need to remember is there are going to be solid foundations of people within our organisations that do just want to come to work. They do want to work 9 till 5 and they don't want to progress. And that's absolutely fine. They can stay where they are within their positions. We just need to know that actually they're performing to their best and they're giving their all of the time. So there's two bits to it. I've seen two extremes. At the moment, I've seen ones where they've completely decoupled it and they've gone, right, we're going to do professional development, we're going to do personal growth. And they've then forgotten about the HR element and they come to me and go, well, we need to get rid of them now. Okay, why? Well, they're not performing. Well, how are they not performing? What, show me, it's that evidence element of it. So what you need to look at if you're developing a strategy in this decoupling is if you're going to go down the professional development, the performance plans, great. Get your policy that shows how you're going to manage that. So whether you're using a system that monitors and tracks it, you have blue sky systems, don't you? And where you can record and you've got clear set targets and you're monitoring it off. That's fine to have that. When we come to pay progression, it's where they are within their scales and if they're going up within those bandings, fine. It's other elements of what does the pay policy say for how they're going to progress through, if they want to jump from one band into another, if they're support, a little bit like your thresholds with your UPS. But then there's the policy that you need for capability. So you would still need a capability policy. And what I would still have is, your performance and your professional development policy is going to go through, but where we feel that you're finding challenges, you may be transferred onto a capability policy.
So
and then within that, sorry, go on, Matthew.
No, I was going to say, so the DfE have just published a perhaps more employer-friendly capability policy.
I like it. It's a good one. If you've not seen it, I would certainly, and maybe it's one we can get the link for everybody to send out. It's quite simple, and that's all it needs to be. HR policies can be so convoluted with bits that don't need to be in there. There's a thing within local authority policies, and not to pick on local authorities, but it will list that this is in conjunction with this legislation. It's not needed. We just need to know that when we're following a policy, we're going through each individual step. That policy is written with the legislation in mind. As long as you are tracking within that legislation, your policy is fine. As long as you're checking ACAS guidance and your policy fits with that, you don't need to say that you've done that. And I think that's one thing that new DfE guidance has shown, Matthew, is it's a nice simple flow through. So yeah, I think if we can find you that link, I think that's one definitely worth sending out for people to have a look at. But what I was saying is, if you've got the performance that says, we're going to do this professional growth, this is how we're going to support you, this is the positive aspect of taking you through your professional development, that policy then says, but if you're struggling, we might take you onto capability. There's nothing stopping within the new separation and decoupling of you having within your pay policy that says, we're going to review pay, we're going to give you pay statements. But if you are under a capability policy at the time, it may be paused, it may be held, or it'll be reviewed. You just need to make sure that as part of your people strategy that you're thinking about where those links and couple up. So one thing I would say, against all of it, really, to go back to that whole, you know, where does your people strategy start? Where does the communication, where do the conversations go? Under the HR element of getting your policies right is have a list of your policies and have I think we've got it, Matthew, haven't we? A tool that actually then shows, well, that policy links with that. So when we're reviewing it, when there's an update coming through, you know, when there's a policy or a legislation change, we can go to that spreadsheet and say, right, okay, we know that it's affecting this, this, and this policy, because 9 times out of 10, if I'm doing a policy review, I can guarantee that they've updated one because it's come into a change. So, for instance, the DfE saying let's decouple, and they're like, on right, okay, we're going to do that. And we forget that it's linked to others. So all of a sudden, a policy is then not making sense because we've forgotten to update something that links back. So key tip is, you know, it's time consuming. Get an administrator or a data person to potentially do it, but take your list of policies and just try and do that bit of the architecture behind it and map it out to which one's linked, so that when you are reviewing, you're not missing a step. And I'm sorry, that took you right off the professional development, didn't it? Sorry.
Oh no, it's all part of it, isn't it? It's because if professional development is what's supposed to stop. It's to grow the efficacy of the workforce back to the people business. We've got to recruit bodies. We've got to grow our workforce. I think that's an interesting point. You know, thank you for calling me old by inference.
Sorry.
I think we've been around the sector long enough, haven't we? That 15 years ago, the mantra was everyone's a leader. And we knew that leaders in schools were leaders, that leaders in maths were leaders, and then senior leaders, middle leaders. We described every teacher as a leader in their classroom. And the language of leadership became nonsensical because it was disconnected from the practicalities of actually managing a workforce. Some people are the troops in the field and they need to follow a leader and be served by a leader. And I think, you know, do feel free to argue with me on this bit, that we currently have a little bit of a fetish around everybody growing. And I'm delighted to hear you say to people on the webinar today that it's okay for people who want to come to work, do a good job and go home, and don't want to grow and be more and do, because the lunacy of everybody, from lunchtime supervisors, exam invigilators, playground supervisors, heads of key stage, heads of subject, all growing all the time. Is everybody eventually going to be a head teacher and then a mat leader?
I think that's the ideal world, isn't it? We want to, but you know, it's about looking at who your individuals are. So I'm not going to bang on about Peter Senge, because that's a different session that me and Steve do when we're doing the masterclasses, and you know, but there is something within that. There is a learning organisation, and if you look at that as a model, it's understanding where you want to be as an organisation and having the conversations of going, well, where do you fit? So let's go back to the caretaker that was asked, what do you do at NASA? And he went, I put the people on the moon. Well, yeah, you do, because you're cleaning the facilities. And it's actually, this comes down to a good people strategy is underpinned and growing that positive culture. And to get that culture is everybody has a value within the organization. So everybody should be valued with the same professional development conversation. You know, we shouldn't just go, well, they don't want to go, they want to stay where they are, so we'll just leave them plodding along and we won't have that conversation. Those conversations are still valid. They're still part of understanding what is moving your school through those terms and, you know, through those challenges. So it's giving them the voice and making them understand, well, actually, everybody should know where you're going with your multi-academy trust or your standalone school, wherever that strategy fits. They should know where you're going as an organisation. They should know what you're trying to achieve. You know, if you're trying to, as a multi-academy trust, grow and bring other schools in, great. Let everybody in the organisation know that that's what you are planning to do. You don't need details, but you need to communicate with them. And that needs to then start feeding down. If I'm the head of a school and I've got this plan, and I'm going to have my heads of departments, they're going to start having their own individual micro strategies, and you fit in it here. So we're going to learn that together and we're going to go through it. Where do you fit? What's your element of it? And if that's you are just bringing your best every day, then that's fine. That's not a problem. And you know, that's the bit that people enjoy and people want to see. And you know, that's what makes your happy workforce. That's what giving them that voice and giving them that ability to go, well, I don't want to grow, but thank you very much. This is how, you know, I don't want to grow, I want to do my job, but actually I need some Excel skills. Or I don't want to grow, but I feel that I'm not quite as confident with behavior management and I might need to just, you know, where am I going wrong? They're not necessarily growing into being the next steps, but they're learning something new. You know, not every teacher wants to go into having those leadership responsibilities. And interestingly, I don't know what people are finding, but I am starting to see people wanting to step down from being UPS and they're wanting to step down from leadership and they want to just go back into the classrooms because they're actually feeling that disconnect of what they enjoyed. And that's fine. It's about empowering them to have those conversations. And if we do that, the research naturally says that actually as an organization we will grow and the culture will be as such that people are comfortable and happy and the retention's then you know better for us. Number of elements. I think I said it at the start, and now Matthew, is HR is kind of bringing in these spider webs of challenges and different pots and recruitment, retention, professional growth. They're all linked, you know.
Yeah.
They all fit within that.
Talking about challenges, and the spider web and almost the avalanche, perhaps, of things that are coming. When we were thinking about what we might talk about on this webinar, we put a bit of a list together of the things that the avalanche that's coming towards HR leads.
Yeah.
Of current issues, things from PPA announcements, affordability of pensions. Do you want to take a canter through some of the issues that you might our delegates today might get blindsided by as HR leads in schools and possibly need to be factoring in to their strategy for this coming year?
I think it's going to be legislation changes are going to be some of the biggest things. You know, we've seen in April the flexible working change. It's a little bit early to tell how it's going to impact, but you know, they've got a day one right now. We can't just go, will you come and justify it to us? Post COVID shows that we can't just say, no, we need you to be in the classroom because you know, we are seeing that movement of the fact that they are pushing towards PPA time can be taken at home. It doesn't stop the safeguarding conversations. I have to sit there and say, as a HR professional, I'll sit there and go, no, you know, that's going to be a challenge of we might need to, you know, be really thoughtful about how we plan lessons with these flexible workings coming through. But we do need to say, actually, if there is a need that there's different duties going on and we're not going to have the numbers within the school, I've not seen any cases because, as I say, it's too early to come through. But I think we will, over the next year or so, start seeing bits coming through where there's going to be refusals and there's going to be, you know, high court showing whether or not we can use safeguarding as we need people in the seats or whether they can go home and do the PPA. But what I would say is, you know, if you're looking at what's going to be coming up over the next year, the whole flexible working request coming in, the taking PPA from home is certainly going to be something that we're going to have to look at. And I think I said it earlier, you know, the pay increases between the percentage increase for your support staff is disproportionate to what they've now announced for teaching. So, you know, I would certainly be looking for my strategies of saying, well, actually, how do we ensure the different areas of values? And, you know, when you're looking at, again, what we said about people strategy is, you know, you look at your recruitment, your retention, your professional development, but you need to look at your well-being, your support and your culture. And that might be something that actually we need to go, well, these laws are changing. Carers leave has changed. So there's a day one right now for, you know, carers leave and dependents isn't the whole traditional it's your mother, your daughter, your mum, your dad. it could be my next door neighbour. And I don't need to come and prove to you that my next door neighbour is a dependent on me. If I go and do her washing or I go and take her wheelie bin out once a week, she is dependent on me. So therefore, I could come to you and say, right, I need to go to hospital. So one thing is going, well, actually, we need to make sure that our policies are tight. Certainly for now, and I've got it, Matthew, from when I did the employment law one. So maybe as a bit of a giveaway, what we'll do is we'll send it out. But I've got the upcoming legislation changes and the policies that you might want to be looking at. So we'll get that sent out as a little bit of a giveaway, just so that you can look at some of the things that are coming in September, October, because you are going to have to then go, well, do we need our own bank of cover supervisors? Do we need our own bank of teaching assistants or, you know, supports? And again, the legislation's changing on that. It's another one where they're saying, well, actually, they want to bring in so that anybody you've got on a 0-hour contract or a casual worker is getting to know when their shifts are going to be. They're getting to know what their patterns are, and they're getting increased rights as well. So I know that me and Matthew are both passionate about saying, actually, remember that your workforce doesn't just include those on payroll. You have your volunteer staff, your trustees are still part of your function in your organisation. They are the unpaid heroes. You know, these are the people that you might want to be considering of keeping close and actually including in your strategy of how do we ensure that we keep them engaged? How do we have our parent readers? How do we make sure that their DBS, their safeguarding checks are there? Because with these changes coming in, they might be the way that you change your workforce and the way that you run your school to have them come in and support and help. So, you know, if there is a teacher, and you know, I appreciate it's not as easy necessarily in secondary schools, but if you're in a primary school and you've got a teacher that wants to take their PPA, is that groups of reading time that your parent volunteers can take off? And is that going to relieve the pressure that you've got on your teaching assistants? So it's just trying to, you know, any strategy's got to be done within your own environment. But for what we were saying, Matthew, is those, you know, they're going to be some things that it's just too early to tell what impact they're going to have, because sometimes people don't know what the law changes are and other times they do. And it depends on how big your union voice is within your schools. And you know, if you've got a larger majority of unions, you'll find that actually they'll be drilling it in, and they'll be telling your staff what they can do and what they can't do. Interestingly, I had a head teacher ask me, and do you know what? I think it'd make perfect sense, but she says, can I not just do flexible working like the footballers do and have it as an open window? So, you know, there's a transfer window when you can put in your flexible working and they can only transfer, because she got a load of flexible working requests as soon as the law changed.
Right.
But she hadn't planned her curriculum. And until she knew what that curriculum, you know, what the next year's timetabling looked like, she couldn't answer the flexible working.
So from a education leadership point of view, the tail is wagging the dog that you are designing your curriculum and timetabling arrangements around the availability of your workforce.
Yeah.
Great for personnel management, well-being and support, but it's that schedule, isn't it? That tension, sorry, that tension when it comes to scheduling of what's right for the kids. The fact that we can't deliver English, maths, geography, whatever it is, first thing in the morning because somebody needs to discharge caring responsibilities, which shunts some of the curriculum into the afternoon every day of the week based on that specialist's availability. Now, that's not great for kids, knowing that, you know, the death slot after lunch is not necessarily the best time to be learning. And if you're truncating your timetabling, yeah, it's tough, isn't it?
It is tough, you know, and that's why we call them challenges, isn't it? You know, if we were in a corporate world, we'd throw money at everything where we could, you know, and we'd cut back where we can't, and we'd say, right, okay, flexible working, not a problem, because you're going to work from home. I mean, I'm sat at home now, Matthew. I've got a home office. I'm sat at home because it worked for me. You know, it was easy. But in schools, we do not have the level of flexibility. And I think it was a point that you've made previously, Matthew, since COVID, there is also an expectation that schools are free childcare for the workforce going out. So, you know, as I say, is the some of the biggest challenges are going to be the fact that we have made those wellbeing leaves easier for people. The government is working more towards wellbeing, and you know, the DfE have published lots of different guidelines and lots of different papers on it. So one thing that I always say is, you know, if you're looking at your people strategy, go out and have a look at the DfE publications, because they are trying to support us with the workarounds for these things that are coming in. It's the same old, isn't it? You know, for safeguarding practices, I always say there is an element of safeguarding, keeping children safe, LADO and all of those never fits with what employment law says that I can do, and it becomes that sticky area. And the carers leave, the menopause leaves, the neonatal leaves, all of these legislations that are coming in over the next year are going to have that impact on how you keep a school functioning and running. You know, the increased budgets, and you know, as they are trying to help us with initiatives and ways to look at it. One thing I would say, Matthew, is data is your key. Metrics and data. I don't think we've touched upon it today, and it would be very remiss of me to say don't ignore what you've got in your school as data. I'm not against you going and spending money on surveys. I know there's a lot of companies out there, I've used them, that do big surveys, and you send out an EDI survey, or you might send out a wellbeing survey. Your touch points for gathering in your information needs to be short, sharp, and sweet. If you're paying into TES and you're on the new subscription, there will be pulse surveys available within that. But we do it within Keystone, where we just go, well, actually, we'll do a Microsoft form, and we'll just ask 2 or 3 questions as a regular basis, just to touch base of how our workforce is feeling, what are the key strainer issues. Again, you know, if you're having SLT leadership meetings, and you know, there's common things that are going, well, at the end of every meeting, going, right, does this time work? We know that we're struggling, but is this still working? Has this meeting been useful? And that data alone can just help go back to the HR, or you know, go, well, actually it's not working, but how do I do it? I don't know how else I can do it. And just have that, well, can we? And actually sometimes we can't fix everything. You know, we do not have magic wands, we do not have crystal balls. There's not anybody in this world that can make something just fit and be perfect. Even in your biggest multi-academy trusts that appear to be functioning with the best well-being, the best culture, there will be elements that don't work. And to go back to the very start of this, of communication being key and talking to those individual groups, there's nothing wrong with going back and going, no, we can't make that work. It's going to have to be that. We can't make it work. Come and tell me a different solution. And if you can, great, we'll trial it. But, you know, all of the metrics that you can gather in. So there's elements within your working system and your KPIs that are going to indicate if you've got an issue. I had a head teacher once, he was like, but my retention's amazing, you know, I'm doing great. And I was like, well, you can't be, because you're at the maximum budget. Everybody's a UPS 3 teacher with a TLR here, there, and everywhere, but you're under recommended improvements. So don't sit there and tell me that it's amazing, because something's not right. Let's go look at your sickness absence. Well, actually, your sickness absence is ridiculously high, because you've never challenged it. So then you're increasing your cost on your supply agencies. So actually, that's what's impacting on your children's education, because where you're going, my retention's great, I'm a great school. Well, no. The other KPI data linked back together is telling me that you're not. And you know, it took 2 years to change that. It took the challenges of, well, why are you ringing me now for my sickness absence? Why do you've never done it before? Well, I'm sorry, we are. And oh, you've brought in an apprentice, a graduate. Oh, actually, they've got some new skills that I didn't know that they had. And actually, and before you know it, you know, that school's now an outstanding school. As I say, that took 5 years to get them from there to there. But it was the fact that we had that key core data, the conversations, the open communication, and all of those different bits linked together that created that positive people change. And that was all built into the strategy. What do we do first? What's going to impact on that? And what's the priority? And if you take those things from the start, break them down, and don't try and change everything at once, it doesn't work. You cannot run at things. You have to go, what is priority? Because we're all human beings. We don't have a million hours in the day, despite what we think.
Thank you, Pip. So just in the last 5 minutes or so of our time on this call today, the things I'm hearing you saying are, when preparing the people strategy, when reviewing the people strategy, the HR lead has to partner with the stakeholders. We're not engaged in academic HR for HR's sake. We are listening and delivering on the needs and the priorities of our fellow leaders within our schools and our MATs. That in the face of, MATs are here to stay, so we are growing our own, and our strategies need to have an element for that, of all sorts of leaders, roles, teaching, support staff, other professions, MAT central teams. That a fundamental element is growing and developing our own. Simplicity in the policies and practices that support it, and taking advantage where the legislative climate or the best practice climate from the government has made things easier. Keeping our eyes on legislation, because we know we've got some changes coming down the line. We'll get a giveaway out to people who've been on the call today around the legislative changes that are coming down the line. Focusing always on recruitment and on that talent supply line, those innovative relations, so with partnership with universities, with where you advertise, who you're advertising, who you're seeking to bring in, and developing a grown-up strategy which is data driven. You're not trying to resolve everything all at once. You can't look at every survey of every school in your MAT and solve every issue, but align to those priorities. I'm picking up a decent approach, a decent sense from you, Pip, that you think HR strategies and HR professionals can be pragmatically optimistic about the challenges which are coming down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is all about, if you've got a strategy, isn't something that you write on a piece of paper and you pick up. Same as a professional development plan is not something that you put in place for somebody in September or October because it's a tick box and you pick it up in April. They're an ongoing entity. You don't take your children through a lesson and then just pick them up again in 6 months and go, well, what did we learn? You're constantly going through the same information and monitoring and checking and having that eyes on. And it's that eyes on and communication that goes back to what I said, is it's just general common sense. And it's sometimes you just need to take a step back to move a step forward. And as HR is, as much as everything's flying around, even as leaders, at the end of the day, we have these skills. We are in schools, we are in multi-academy trusts, and we have a million and different things going on. And sometimes it's just about going, right, okay, I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to sit in a room. I'm going to go, no, I don't want anybody knocking on my door today. I'm going to sit down and just go, what is the priority? What is going to help? And yeah, after that, it's just that common sense of going, right, okay, I know what I'm doing. I don't have to do it all. It doesn't have to be me that's doing it all. That person's going to take ownership of that. That person's going to take ownership of that. And then I'm going to come back. And I know, just one last thing, Matthew, you will say, because it's within you as your governing background, you would also say is let your trustees know what's going on as well, wouldn't you?
Yeah. As key stakeholders.
And they have ideas, because you've got to remember, sitting on those trustees panels is you have outside experience. I've sat on many panels where you've got people that are coaching and mentoring experts, and that's what they do as their day job. I've sat with them and they've gone, I'm a HR professional by day, or I'm a solicitor by day. you know, it's always worth going, okay, run your eyes over my strategy. Does it work? Does it fit? What do you think? So, you know, say, just as that is my final bit of going, it is common sense, but use the tools and the resources that you've got to support you along the way, and don't think that you can do it all on your own, because you don't need to.
That's a very, very positive, very helpful message to end there. You don't have to do it all on your own. It doesn't all sit on your shoulders. Folks, thank you for being on our webinar this morning. Thank you very much to Pip for giving us the benefit of your experience. If you want to get in touch with Keystone, clearly you know how to get in touch with us. You're already registered on a webinar, but just an email address, hello@keystoneknowledge.com, will reach us if you have any post webinar inquiries or anything we can help you with. Enjoy sunny or less sunny Dorset and the rest of the country as well today. Thank you very much, and hopefully we will see you on our next webinar. Take care, everybody. Thank you very much, and goodbye.